Okay, so as I was mentioning at the beginning of this, an activist named Wayne Hsiung was instrumental in organizing what the organization that he co-founded, Direct Action Everywhere, calls Open Rescue, which means that unlike in the past, activists would just sneak around and hide their identity and so forth, and say, look, the conditions, show video footage they've taken of the conditions in this or that factory farm and how horrible they are. What DXE is doing is, that's short for Direct Action Everywhere, sorry, is openly, without any concealment of their identity or anything, going in and investigating the conditions in these farms and rescuing animals and saying, well, look, we have a legal right to do what we're doing because these animals are in terrible condition. Animal welfare laws are being violated, and these animals that are most sick or injured are not worth anything to you anyway. You can't obviously sell an animal that's either too sick to reach market weight or whatever, or isn't going to live until slaughter time anyway. So Wayne founded this group, and they started doing animal rescues in the United States, and he's Chinese American himself. And he decided that he was going to travel to Yulin, China, where they have the Yulin Dog Meat Festival. They have farms in the area. Or
let me just put that into perspective. He didn't travel from America to Guangxi. He was studying in Northwest University, which is in Xi'an. And
no. He was a professor at Northwestern University in Chicago before he founded DXE in 20.
Yeah, he was in China. He was in China anyway. I knew he was at the university. I didn't realize he was a professor, part of the faculty. I think I probably would know many people who know him. I was not personally involved, but I worked with a large group of people who were in Guangzhou. I was working for the British Council in Guangzhou in 2016, 2017, and many of my colleagues would gather together and head down to Yulin for Western protests against this Chinese festival. There's a big problem with the festival in that the festival doesn't have official recognition. Now, let's put this into a little perspective here. He was arrested in China, but he was never charged in China, and he's left China with at least one of the dogs that he rescued. And now, give this some perspective. He's in America, and he gets charged and convicted of doing something, and in China, he gets told you can't do this, and you have to leave the country now because you've broken our laws. Now, I'm not going to get into the debate here about whether this is a good law or a bad law. China has now banned the sale of dog meat, but and I've got a link to, and I'll put the link into the description. There is a link in. It's been banned. China, the Yulin festival couldn't be banned because it wasn't actually a festival. In order to ban something, it has to exist, but it wasn't actually a festival. It didn't really exist. It wasn't an entity in itself. You can't ban something that is a tradition or a culture and say, this is an effective legal ban. You can't, you couldn't ban Christmas, for example, and stop people celebrating it. That's the fact. This is the way it is. Now, the Yulin festival is not a recognized entity. And if it was a company, they could prosecute it. But what this is a group of people who get into this one place and they do this. So that made it very difficult for the government. Despite what people think about China, it actually follows a very strict rule of law. And the government saying, well, we can't do anything to stop this because we don't have laws for animal protection. Now, this again it kind of relates to your trans issues, and you're linking your trans issues to your Palestinian slaughter. These two things don't go hand in hand. Now, the same thing in China. China opened itself up 45 years ago, 1979, 78, 79. And it started its path towards moderate wealth. China is still not a wealthy country, although it has some wealthy people. It is still a poor, relatively poor country. It has no more poverty. It's taken 45 years to get to that point. Now, what they've done is they've said, we need to prioritize what laws we set. There's a limit to the time, there's a limit to the ability, there's a limit to what you can do, and there's a limit to what you can do and maintain your popularity. Because if you don't maintain your popularity, you've got problems. And the Communist Party really does want to remain a popular party. It does everything it does for the majority of the people. So what it did, it waited until there was enough outcry over Yulin. 90%, probably higher, of Chinese people do not eat anything that normal meat-eating people in the West eat. Now, there used to be snake restaurants. They're not anymore. I'm told, I've never seen this, but I'm told it used to be possible to eat things like monkeys and monkeys' brains. I've never seen that. I've never heard anywhere where I could go to get that. And I've lived here now for 19, nearly 20 years. So traditionally, we eat pork, beef, lamb, lots of duck, lots of chicken. We eat the same things that meat eaters, I know you don't, Jeff, but meat eaters everywhere eat the same things that 99% of Chinese people eat 99% of the time. So even people who do eat dog don't eat dog every day. It's not that kind of thing. And what they've done now is there is no legal avenue where you can sell dog meat or cat meat. There are a list of animals, and it's a United Nations list, a list of animals that are allowed to be harvested, farmed, harvested, slaughtered for meat. There's a list of animals, and China adheres to that list. As of 2020, the eating of dog in China is not legal. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen. There are some people, and Yulin is one place. Yulin is in Guangxi. It's about 700 kilometers from here. It's not far from the very, very famous Guilin, where the beautiful rock mountains are in the beautiful river. It really is a nice place. And my wife and I cycled through there in 2020. And I can assure you, this was in April, 2 months before the ban on dog meat. And we saw dogs for sale. Dogs are for sale in that area, or they were in 2020. I would guess if they're for sale now, it's illegal. It's gone. Yeah. The market for dogs is now illegal, which makes them very expensive. And there is no avenue anywhere inside of China where you can legally farm dog meat. It's not possible anymore. That's not to say it doesn't happen. 40 years ago, I was a police officer in the UK, and there was dog fighting, cockfighting, badger baiting. There are people who do these things. They're sick people.
The famous football player in the United States, Michael Vick, was convicted and sent to prison for being involved in a dogfighting ring a number of years ago.
There you go. So, I mean, it does happen. But, I mean, I get angry when I hear and see, I see this all the time, particularly with things like COVID, where you eat bats and you eat dogs. No, Chinese people have never eaten bats.
No.
It just doesn't, it's just not a food.
It's just a racist stereotype. Both the bats and the dogs. And of course, when Wayne was doing this rescue, it was legal, and these people could engage in their trade out in the open and so forth. But the vast majority of Chinese people even then didn't eat dogs, and of course don't now. So this is a long article, but I just wanted to share a little bit of it so I could give you a little bit of his perspective and what happened with that rescue, and then we'll talk about what's happened more recently, where he was convicted on trumped up charges related to an animal rescue here in the United States. So So Wayne says, I'm a co-founder of the Grassroots Animal Rights Network Direct Action Everywhere. Rescuing animals is our mission. We go to the darkest, most dangerous, and most secretive places on earth to stop violence against animals. We don't ask for permission. We simply go in, defying the law where necessary, laws against trespassing, etc., and take injured animals out. Animal rights activists call this open rescue because we publicize our actions and our faces openly to the world. As an open rescue activist, I have witnessed some of the most disturbing sights imaginable. Chickens so deprived that they are eating each other alive, piglets so crowded they are trampling one another to death, and farms that resemble evil fortresses from a sci-fi movie with their massive assembly lines of death and cases of pharmaceuticals. But even I was not emotionally prepared for what I saw in Yulin, people killing and eating dogs. And he tells a story about how when he was a little kid, his parents took him on a trip to China, and he was horrified to discover that there were dogs being sold for meat there. And so he wanted to go back there many years later and investigate the dog meat trade and rescue some. But he talks about conversation he had. Not sure if I can find. Oh, okay. So he talks to the dog meat traders, and after a bit of sort of arguing with him and trying to convince him he was legit interested in buying dog meat or buying a dog from the dog meat farm, which of course he wasn't, he was able to arrange to visit a dog farm. So he says, to him, the farmer who owned this farm that he visited, I learned as we talk, all animals are the same. Dogs and pigs, he tells me, there's no difference. At least on that, we agree. Because that's one of the points that they wanted to make is, look, pigs and cows and so on and so forth, just like dogs, are sentient beings. They have feelings. And so if they're horrifically abused, they're going to suffer both physically and emotionally. And so that's DXC's mission, is to show how this happens routinely on animal farms, even when there are animal welfare laws, which are not necessarily obeyed, and even when they are so-called humane farms, where there are somewhat stricter standards in place, but they can still do things like separate cows and their calves at a very early age, castrate pigs without anesthesia, and so on and so forth. But anyway, so after a harrowing experience where, as you mentioned, he wound up being caught and thrown in jail, and they threatened to destroy their camera equipment and video of the farm and so forth. Somehow he was able to get out and rescue 2 dogs. So fast forward to a few years and quite a few animal rescue missions later, and over the past year or two, Wayne, as well as some of the other activists in DXC, have been charged with various felonies, either felony burglary, because they say, well, you stole animals, but of course the animals had no value. So they were able to get out of a couple of cases by pointing out, well, it can't be stealing if what we're stealing is worthless to you, right? It's not really.
That's actually. Let me get back to my police training from 50 years ago, 45 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know about in America. I don't know the American legal system. A person is guilty of theft if he dishonestly appropriates the property of another with the intention of permanently depriving the other of it. That's the definition of theft. I remember that from 1977, where I had to learn it by heart so I could recite it in an exam situation. Now, there's a few different factors in there. If you appropriate the property of another, there's no mention of value at all. So in the UK for certain, in Australia for certain, if you take something that belongs to somebody else, even if it's just a pen or a toothpick, it doesn't matter. It belongs to another person. So in theory, if you're at my kitchen table and you say, can I have a toothpick? I say, no, you can't. If you take one, you've stolen it. What's the value of that? It doesn't matter. It's still a theft under the UK and the Australian style of law. The next thing is that you need to have the permission to take something, and you need to permanently, you have the intent to permanently deprive the owner of it. So I'm going to take your dog, whether that dog has a value or not. If I take your dog and I have no intention of bringing your dog back healthy, I might take your dog. My intention is to bring it back to health, pay the vet's bills, and bring it back to you as a healthy dog. That's not a theft. But of course, Wayne's interest wasn't in doing that. It was in helping the dog, of course. And I get that. This is not me being anti what Wayne is doing. This is me just putting the law into its perspective here. If you take away something with the intention of depriving the owner of it, you are guilty of theft. If you do that as a trespasser, you are guilty of burglary. Burglary is three different things. It's theft, it's criminal damage, and believe it or not, it's rape. If you want to do one of those three things, then you can be guilty of burglary if you're a trespasser when you do them. So, you've got to, if you understand the law, you understand that Wayne is actually, if he got away with that, he was quite lucky. In China, here's the interesting thing about Wayne's situation. He stole a dog. He got away with it. He left the country, and the dog left with him. So what does that tell you about our two different legal systems?
Yeah. It also helped probably that he was an American citizen. But
wouldn't make any difference. It wouldn't make a jot of difference at all. The system here, it would have been more complicated with an American, but if they were going to charge him, they'll charge him. They've charged plenty of Americans before, and I know many people who have broken laws in China and never been prosecuted for it. They call this a police state. The opposite is true. It's not a police state at all.
I can't remember whether it was in this article. I don't know if you remember or not, or somewhere else, but I read that it seemed to him that the police were on his side. So even though
now they would be. Sorry, phone call came in. Now they would be on his side because now there is a law that says you can't farm dogs. You can't sell dogs. That would mean that if he did what he did today, the police would support him. What happened in 2016, there was no law to protect him. So what they probably did, now I read the article, he was given a bit of a beating. He was arrested by the police. And you know why he was arrested? Because they can't arrest the 20 people who were beating him because there's only 4 or 5 of them. So they arrested the smallest party, and they did it for his own safety. He was never charged with anything. He was taken away. He was interviewed, and he might describe that as an interrogation. And being interviewed by a police officer inside of a Chinese police station is probably going to be a very unnerving experience for anyone. They may have thought he was Chinese at first, realized he was American, and then they said, well, look, we don't want the hassles here. The nearest American consulate is in Guangzhou, 600 kilometers away. What are we going to do with this guy? Let's give him a cup of tea, give him a stern warning, and kick him out. That's how they deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's kind of like, in the United States, until recently, at least, it's legal in about half of the states now. But, it was often the case that if cops would catch you with a small amount of marijuana, they would basically just give you a slap on the wrist because they didn't think it should be illegal either in a lot of cases. And that's probably what happened here. They probably
for their own use too.
Yeah. And that too. But they probably thought, well, hey, I don't like people eating dogs either. And he showed them the video footage of what was happening, and they probably didn't like what they saw. So anyway, he got out of that, and fast forward to 2023, and he was put on trial for he's been tried 2 or 3 times in the last couple of years for these animal rescues where they go in and investigate the conditions on farms, show that they're not treating animals as advertised, and then taking animals out that are too sick to be of any value to the farm. And it has, I don't know what exactly the law says. I'm sure there are distinctions depending on what the value of the property is, but in the United States, I mean, but in any case, obviously you've got to convince a jury that a person is guilty of a crime, and so juries have discretion to decide, well, hey, look, yeah, he might technically have stolen something, or they might technically have stolen something from these farmers, but it was of very little value, and they showed that these animals were suffering horribly, and felt sympathy for the animals, and so they acquitted Wayne in a case recently in Utah. But this recent case in Sonoma County, California, was one where they did convict him and are trying to convict some other folks. So I'll just quickly read through the press release describing the case. So animal rights activist and attorney Wayne Hsiung was sentenced to 90 days in jail, followed by 24 months of probation for his involvement in nonviolent animal rescues at 2 factory farms in Sonoma County: Sunrise Farms, a major egg producer, and Reichardt, California's largest duck farm. Judge Laura Pasaglia also ordered that Hsiung have no contact in any form with the other named co-conspirators in the case, a list including many of his closest friends and one of his co-defendants in a beagle rescue trial scheduled for next March. So for 2 years, he's not allowed to talk to, for example, his best friend, who used to be his girlfriend, as well as many others who have been involved in these rescues that he's very personally close to. So it's really cruel what this judge did. Upon the verdict, Judge Pasaglia ordered that Hsiung be remanded into custody without bail while awaiting sentencing, despite the nonviolent nature of his actions. So he's denied bail, even though he's not a flight risk and he hasn't committed a violent crime. Hsiung is appealing the conviction in Sonoma based on several rulings by Judge Pasaglia that constitute prejudicial and reversible error. Attorney Chris Caraway said, "I often hear courts describe trials as a search for the truth. Mr. Hsiung's trial was anything but. The press had limited access, trial participants were unconstitutionally gagged from the beginning, and the court bent over backwards to prevent the defense from detailing the chronic animal cruelty found, which informed the intent behind the actions." The mass open rescue at Sunrise Farms was prompted by investigations that occurred in 2016 through 2018, which found that despite Proposition 2, which is an animal welfare law in California banning intensive confinement of animals on factory farms, Sunrise was confining tens of thousands of birds in towering 15-foot tall rows of tightly packed cages, inside of which many birds were sick, dying, and dead. And they found other violations of animal welfare laws too. Anyway, the point is that these farms are violating animal welfare laws right and left, and as well as even if they weren't violating any, the animals.
I have two questions. Questions. First question is: are the farms being prosecuted for their offenses? That's the first question. And the second question is: does the judge need to be elected to that position? I know there are 38 states where judges need to be elected. If the judge needs to be elected, a supplementary question: are these farms donors to the judge? Now, even if they're not, this shows you how corrupt your American system can be.
Yeah.
If that judge is seeking re-election and he is favoring Wayne is a guy with he's got a cause, but he's not a rich guy. Whereas the corporations that are manufacturing is not the right word. They're selling eggs that the chickens are manufacturing, or they're selling chicken meat or whatever it is that they're selling. Now, when you get into that kind of situation, you've really got to look at it. Needs an investigative journalist to go one step beyond this, and this is where his lawyers should be bringing this up. Judge, can you tell me, is this corporation that is suing my client or is prosecuting my client one of your donors? Now, surely that in a country like America should be transparent. If it's not, then you have a serious problem.
Well, I don't know all the details, but yeah, I mean, this judge is very corrupt. He's got a lot of links to animal agribusiness in the area.
There you go. There you go.
But yeah, what I was saying is that, instead of prosecuting the agribusiness companies for violating all these animal welfare laws, which they were, of course, DXC, filed criminal complaints about these violations. The authorities did nothing about that. Instead, they went after Wayne and his colleagues involved in these rescues. Originally, this was back in 2018 when the rescue took place. Originally, about 100 people were arrested and charged with felonies. Either they took a plea bargain or they were acquitted or whatnot. And, anyway. But yeah, they're having the book thrown at them for trying to save animals, to document animal cruelty. And meanwhile, the producers, the farmers, if you want to call them that, and their companies are getting off scot-free for violating
let's
the law.
call them what they are. Let's not try and be polite. They're corporate criminals.
Right. Yeah.
That's what they are.
Yeah. Or as I forget who coined this, but animal harmers instead of animal farmers.
It's not a bad one. Yeah, could have been a mistype. The F and the H are very close to each other. But that's a good one. Yeah. Animal harmers, not farmers. But when they're doing this, they're corporate criminals. When they're committing crimes in order to profit from those crimes, and someone or some law is broken. If I'm a producer of orange juice and I produce this in orange juice and it should be up to there, but I only give you to there, and I do that for 1 million glasses of orange juice, then I'm a corporate criminal. And I'm saving, even if I'm only saving 10 milliliters, I'm saving a hell of a lot of money if I'm selling 1 million of them, or 10 million, or 100 million. So that's a corporate crime. It may be kind of marginal. Who cares? But when you start adding that up, that's massively criminal. And this is what they're doing. You start thinking about how these animals are treated, and it breaches every law that they've got. That's something.
I mean, it's not just violating animal welfare regulations, but it's also, when the animals are so packed together on these factory farms, they have to shoot them full of a ton of antibiotics to keep them from keep them alive, keep them from getting sick, and that eventually causes antibiotic resistance, which becomes a very big health problem.
Can I give you another Chinese example, another take on China here? Colombia, the country Colombia, has recently just signed a deal that took 12 years to make. And the deal was that Colombia are now selling beef into China. And it's a good deal for China because the beef is good quality beef. And it's a good deal for Colombia because they have a lot of cattle and they have a big market for it now. This is all good, but it's taken 12 years. Why did it take 12 years? Why did Australia have trouble with the lobster that they were sending to China? I don't know if you know this story. Every Australian will know this. It's been all over Australian media for 5 years. 5 years ago, Chinese government suddenly said, we're not taking any imports of lobsters from Australia anymore. And the reason was they test the product when it arrives here. They need to have certification when they arrive here. One of the tests is a veterinarial residue. So any medicine that is given to the people, to the animals, and if the animal is then slaughtered and there is any residue above certain limits, then that needs to be taken back and it can't be sold into China. This is what China does. It's protecting its people by protecting its imports. And it really was interesting to me to find this out, because I never realized this. I just assumed that because you can go to the market here and it's a bit of a free-for-all. You can actually, in some parts of China, you can see animals being killed in the market, and that's because the people want fresh meat. I don't like it. I'm a meat eater. I'm not a vegan or vegetarian, but I don't want to look my animal in the eye when it's killed. I mean, that's a fact that most Westerners don't want. We go to the marketplace and we see meat and we buy meat, or we go to the supermarket and we see meat is nicely packaged and we buy that meat. But in China, you can go, I want that chicken. And they pull the chicken out, cut its throat. But now, just after COVID, that is now illegal. Can't do that since COVID. So since 2020, all the laws have changed. All the meat is slaughtered before it comes to the market. The problem with that is that some people are saying, well, how fresh is it? I don't know when it was killed. And that's a fact, because they're sold in an open market. I mean, maybe a closed market, but what we call a wet market. So that's causing a little bit of problem. But China is very, very strict on what ends up in our tables, in our dishes. Very strict. And that's something that really most people in the West wouldn't understand. They assume that China is kind of this dirty, filthy place. It's absolutely not. It's completely the opposite. They are very, very strict. Now, you just talked about the injections. Chickens get an injection of hormones and all kinds of things into the back of their neck. If they tried to export that chicken to China without doing the tests for veterinarial residue, then they wouldn't get an import license or export license to come to China. And that's something that most people wouldn't understand or realize. It's been in law for a long time. It takes many years for any country to achieve an export license for livestock or for product of livestock to get into China. Something the Americans seem, if you've got this antibiotic resistance because your farmers are pumping, because they have no choice, they're pumping full of antibiotics and hormones to make them grow bigger. I don't know if you've tasted chicken. You've never been to China, and you probably wouldn't have tasted chicken anyway. But chicken in China tastes so much better than chicken in Australia. I don't know about America. And certainly in the UK. And it's much smaller. There's less meat. It's because it's not injected with hormones to make it grow. 45 days later, they're cutting its throat and doing what they do to animals and packaging them. But in China, they don't do that. They just allow the animal to grow naturally.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's all these things that are harmful, both potentially to human health and, of course, the health of the animals and to the environment. Like, you have these massive factory farms with all these animals concentrated in one place, and they don't do anything with the waste. And as you probably know, of course, raising cattle or other ruminants on the massive scale that we do in the West is a major contributor to climate change, because of the methane emissions from the cow's breath due to their digestive process, and also due to all the land that has to be cleared to create grazing pasture for them and to grow animal feed for them as well as other animals. So it's a really overlooked contributor to environmental problems. That's really major. But very little of this is regulated, or if it is regulated in the United States, the regulations aren't enforced because, as you know, this is just a very corrupt country where, in one industry after another, certainly including agribusiness, the U.S. government is captured by corporations, and they do corporations bidding. And so that's why you have these horrific situations that Wayne and others active in DXE have documented, and other animal rights groups have documented here in the U.S.
Your corporations, any legislation that you have is going to favor the corporations, because the corporations, possibly one of the most evil corporations in the world is your biggest agribusiness in the world's Monsanto. Look what they've been doing for the last 40, 50 years, or maybe a little less than that. But since Donald Rumsfeld was in the administration, he changed the way that US eats, and basically created your obesity problem, because no sugar because they've got cornstarch coming in. That's better. It's not better at all. Or corn fructose, I think it's called, not cornstarch.
High fructose corn syrup. Yeah.
There you go. You know more about that than me, but that's a fact. Your corporations have basically created an unhealthy society. Forget about the
I mean, even as a vegan, at times I struggle with my weight because I used to eat products that had, the corn syrup or sugar, and I cut out anything with sugar basically, unless I go out. So that's helped a lot.
Australia's the same. I mean, I can remember taking my grandkids to McDonald's in Australia and standing in a queue behind two people. And I swear I couldn't see round them without moving a meter. Both of them were the same. You want to see round them, you've got to, whoa, look at the size of this person.
Or their body's blocking most of the aisle and their grocery cart's blocking the rest of the aisle. It's like,
I actually thought that these were unusual. And then we went to sit down at a table and just about, you couldn't sit at some of the tables because they're full of a person. That was it, one person who takes a whole table, and they're uncomfortable sitting on chairs, so they have to sit on benches because they're hanging off either side of the chair. And I mean, I'm overweight. I struggle with my weight when I'm not exercising, when I'm not riding my bike. I struggle with my weight. I put on weight. I drink beer, which is sugar as well. But when I go back to Australia, people look at me and go, "Oh, you're looking good, mate. How are you going? You lost some weight?" No, I haven't. I put on weight. I'm 100 kilos, but they're 120, 130, 140. Mm-hmm. It really is a very sad situation. And I've no doubt America is as bad as. And some of the Pacific Island nations really have an obesity problem that is huge. And forgive the pun, but their obesity problem is huge.
Yeah, for sure. Well, ideally, if you eat, a healthy plant-based diet and you cut out both the, processed food, the oil and sugar, and the fat from, at least the higher fat animal products, you will lose weight if you're overweight. I mean,
I also get on my bike and I ride to the next city, spend the night there, and ride home again the next day. Things like that.
That helps.
Yeah, that helps.
I run about 5 or 6 miles a day, so keeps me going. But let me just. Where did that go?
Is Wayne allowed to talk to you?
Yeah, he's allowed to talk to me. I haven't been involved in any of the animal rescues, so.
Ask him if he remembers the people from the British Council in Guangzhou. Many of them were friends of mine, and it was, I think it's June. It's the midsummer, 21st of June is the Yulin Dog Festival, 20th or 21st of June. And they used to hire vans and vehicles and go down there and do dog rescues and things. And there was always in their groups, there was always anybody want a dog kind of thing. Not really.
Yeah.
Very hard for the job we were doing.
Not for meat.
But not for meat. That's right. But in the job that we were doing, it was very difficult to have a pet because we were constantly traveling, all of us.
Yeah.
But Yulin, I've been to Yulin. I've seen dogs there. The stories that I haven't been to the farms, but I have seen dogs being mistreated in the streets. But we're going back several years, and my understanding, I haven't been back to Yulin since the law was changed, but my understanding is that it's gone underground. It's almost non-existent now.
Mm-hmm.
Traditional Guanxi culture, yes, Anonymous. Traditions can be changed, though, and need to be. They really need to be. And I think one of the problems in China
used to be a tradition too, right? So
bullfighting as well, things like that. One of the problems in China is that there's no animal welfare protection laws.
Mm-hmm.
We have laws to protect humans in China, and they just say, well, why do we need to protect animals? They're not one of us, that kind of thing. There's still many things about China that you find a little surprising, but it's basically a case of development. They're always a little bit behind because they've come. 1949 they started, then they had 20 years or 25 years of chaos, And then suddenly they started to get things right in 79
Mhm.
with Deng Xiaoping. Now, I'm not saying that Mao did everything wrong, but he did some things wrong. And he created a foundation of the country that we've got now. So he's very
Yeah.
highly regarded. But then Deng
Yeah.
Xiaoping was the one who put it in place, and then things can start happening. And as the country develops, Mao banned dog. I don't think Mao banned it. I think he discouraged it. Dog meat has never been illegal until 2020, but certainly it was not something that is on the menu. You don't go to a restaurant and say, "Oh, I fancy dog today." It doesn't happen. You go to a restaurant that specializes in dog meat, or you used to. Now you can't, at least not legally. I'm fairly certain if I wanted to find dog meat, I could find it, but
Yeah.
it would be illegal. I'd be breaking the law. The person selling it to me would be breaking the law. The person who sold it to the restaurant would be breaking the law. That's the difference now. So yeah, it's still going to happen, I'm sure.
Yeah. But I mean, we have animal welfare laws in the United States, but
They
either
get
they're
broken.
not enforced or
Mm.
they don't really do that much. So,
Mm.
for example, you can still castrate or debeak, castrate an animal or debeak a bird, which they do because they keep them in such crowded conditions that they peck each other, right? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and you can do those things without any anesthesia, so it creates horrible pain for the animal, but they're
Mm.
allowed to do it even in California, which supposedly has the strictest animal welfare laws, although as we've been discussing, they're not really enforced very well.